Hello, diplomats. I hope you're all doing good and finding yourself safe in times of a global pandemic. Today, in this video, we are going to discuss the tussle between the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi and the elected government of Delhi. Diplomats, it is in news because for one reason is we recently, unfortunately, had a riot situation in Delhi. It was a moment of communal riots, so it's the communal disharmony is a blot on democracy. I think we have to be very clear on that. No matter who instigates, what happens, who kills whom, or who gets killed, communal disharmony is not something that as a mature democratic society we all have to encourage. Delhi had communal riots. So in that case, the Delhi government decided to appoint prosecutors. When in the appointment of prosecutors is being done, and the lieutenant governor is not in agreement with that, so that is a context of why the tussle between both the government and lieutenant governor is again in news. Not just now, also before 2 years back, when Anil Bajaj was the lieutenant governor, we've also had the similar issue where the Delhi government accused lieutenant governor interfering in the matters of governance. So that is brief, the context of why today in this video we are discussing lieutenant governor and the government of Delhi. So before trying to understand why this issue and the significance of this issue, I think we have to know an important chapter in the constitution and also in your polity books is the chapter on union territories. This is a very detailed and a very small chapter, but yet an important chapter because the issue of Delhi, the issue of Puducherry was also in news last year. So why is this keep coming again and again, and how do we understand this? Like I said in the previous video, that the only way to master, the only way to have a very good grip over syllabus is to know why certain issues are in news and how do we link them with the static syllabus. So in this case, now we know the issue is happening between the government of Delhi and the lieutenant governor. So now let's understand what exactly union territories are, what are its constitutional provisions, what kind of incidents led to formation of such union territories, and most importantly, in case of Delhi, what are the special provisions that the state of Delhi has, and why the issue is again in news. So we are going to discuss that today. Fundamentally, to establish, Article 1 of Indian Constitution clearly talks about three issues: 1, territories of state; 2, union territories; and 3, territories that may be acquired by government of India at any point in time. So these are the three classification that we have in Article 1. We all know that for now we have 29 states, 7 union territories, but no acquired territories. However, the constitution clearly has provisions about all of this. So now we know the states and state function, they're all part of the larger federal setup that India has envisioned for in its constitution. Now we will discuss detailedly about the second part, that is the union territories. So what exactly are union territories? Union territories are those areas of this country which are under direct control and administration of the central government. So there is no second to this understanding that they are under the direct control of the government, of the central government. Hence, when we call they are under direct control of the central government, so the administrator, the chief commissioner, or the lieutenant governor who's appointed to take care of the activities in that particular areas are agents of the central government. So this is a clear distinction and a departure between the role of governor and the role of administrators of these union territories. Like role of governor, we've discussed in the video that it's an independent constitutional office. It's not an appointment under central government. Whereas when it comes to lieutenant governor or administrator or chief commissioner of these particular union territories, they are under direct control. Since they are under direct control, these areas are called centrally administered areas. So, the way vocabulary is being coined, the way we call certain things in certain way has a very clear historical etymological meaning to it. So that's the reason you have to understand that whenever union territories comes to your mind, you have to, one thing immediately should click in your mind is they are under direct control and administration of the central government. Hence, they are called centrally administrated territories or centrally administrated areas. So coming from that, now we have creation of union territories. So how exactly we've had union territories? Meghalaya, Manipur, Tripura, Arunachal Pradesh, they were also union territories before. However, eventually over a period of time, they have attained statehood. So in 1956, uh, by 7th Constitutional Amendment Act and also the State Reorganization Act, we've had given a constitutional status to union territories. That is one point. And apart from this, we have seven, and apart after this constitutional amendment, 7th Constitutional Amendment, which has to be underlined, we have 7 union territories which are formed in according to the dates given. So if you want to go through that, Andaman and Nicobar Islands are formed in 1956. Delhi was formed in 1956. Lakshadweep was formed in 1956. So in 1956, 3 union territories were formed. Dadar and Nagar Haveli in 1961, Daman and Diu in 1962, and Puducherry in 1962, and Chandigarh in 1966. So these are the union territories that are formed. And most importantly, in 1992, Delhi was redesignated as the National Capital Territory. That's something very important, and we are going to discuss the significance of Delhi as a union territory, which is part of Article 239 AA. So how is Delhi different from Puducherry? In fact, how is Delhi different from other union territories? We are going to cover in the later part of this video. So apart from this, how have we divided these union territories? So we have divided these union territories into four, roughly for a convenience, into four categories. One is for political and administrative convenience. You could put example of Chandigarh and Delhi in it. Second could be cultural distinctiveness. So cultural distinctiveness is a very important part of India's diversity. So in that category, we could put Puducherry, Dadra and Nagar Haveli, Daman and Diu. And third one is strategic importance, is Andaman Nicobar Islands, Lakshadweep. They are very strategically important areas of Indian territory. And fourth, special treatment and care of backward tribal people. So this was a category where we can put Mizoram, Manipur, Tripura, and other states. But eventually, we've also had special provisions for them. We have sixth schedule for them. We've also had various provisions to for the administration of tribal areas and schedule areas. So this fourth category now almost seems redundant at this present scenario, because we have other detailed provisions for these particular states. So now, having said of this triad understanding of political convenience, cultural distinctiveness, and also strategic importance. If you look at the east coast and west coast of India, roughly we could understand in a layman's languages. The east coast is where the French colonies were. West coast is where the Portuguese colonies were. So that's roughly the understanding of what colonies lies which part of the coast. Apart from this, now how do we administer union territories? So one thing we all have to understand when you write your mains answers or your approach to polity, social justice, international, the entire paper too, is when you write something, it has to be substantiated either by a law, a committee report, a Supreme Court judgment, or the constitutional backing to it. So apart from these three, it becomes mere opinion. And during mains, you might want to put your opinion and analysis, but your opinion and analysis has to be substantiated by a fact not given by me, you, or some xyz, but given by certain statutes, laws, and constitution. So in that case, please be mindful of the fact that you are very clear about the constitutional mandates of everything that you read. So in that scenario, administration of union territory. So we you cannot randomly administer a country or a state or a union territory or any part of an area. You have a law, you have a mandate. Now what is that mandate? Administration of union territories are given in the constitution from article 239 to 241. It very clearly in part 8. It specifically deals with the union territories and how we are going to approach them. So apart from this, I've already said in the starting of the video that it's not necessarily the lieutenant governor we call them. We can call them chief commissioner. We can also call them administrator. So it is up to the veracity and the kind of situation that arises to that particular union territory. So now apart from this, we have something called lists. We have state lists, we have concurrent lists, and we have union lists. So at Schedule 7 of Indian Constitution clearly talks about the legislative division of this list and gives us an insight into what kind of legislations can be done and what are the subject matter related to this list. in coming talking of this list, parliament actually, since we've already established that these are centrally administrated territories and they're under direct control of the central government, so it obviously means the parliament will have utmost control and utmost liberty to do any kind of changes in all the legislative matter related to all the list about union territories. So the power of parliament also this power of parliament where it can make changes in any of the list also extends to Delhi and Puducherry, in spite of them having their local and own legislative assemblies. So this is one important point. And apart from this, on the for this we have an exception for Delhi, which we are going to discuss in Delhi separate part. So apart from this, there is something called judiciary that we all know. So the parliament can establish a high court for the union territory, can also put the jurisdiction of that particular union territory under the high court of an adjacent state. For that matter, Andaman and Nicobar Islands are under the jurisdiction of Calcutta High Court. Chandigarh is in the jurisdiction of Punjab and Haryana High Court. Dadar and Nagar Haveli are in Bombay High Court. Daman and Diu are in Bombay High Court. Delhi, of course, Delhi is an only union territory which has its own high court. And Lakshadweep is again under Kerala and is under Kerala jurisdiction, and Puducherry is under Madras High Court jurisdiction. So now we've discussed the legislative aspect of it. Initially we've discussed the executive part of it, where we clearly said they're centrally administered unit, centrally administered territory. Second, we've understood the legislative part of it, where the central government will have utmost control in making all the changes in all the lists that are mentioned in the Schedule 6 of the Indian Constitution. Apart from this, now we've discussed judiciary. So this roughly covers what are three major areas of legislative, executive, and judiciary, and the administration of union territories, which are clearly mentioned from 239 article of Part 8. So now, apart from this, we've said the first category in the classification was states. The second category was union territories, and third category is the territories that India might acquire. So the constitution does not have any separate provisions for the administration of acquired territories. So this is an important line. Let's say it could be also, see, wherever there are exceptions, there is high possibilities of prelims questions coming from that area. So you have to, if there is a question saying that there is clear constitutional mandate about administration of acquired areas, that means it's wrong. There is no such thing in the constitution, but the constitutional provisions for the administration of union territories might apply to those acquired territories. That might. It's not a will and should. So that's the directive here. And now we're coming to Delhi. So the reason behind this video, the very genesis of this video, is because of the controversy about the Lieutenant Governor in Delhi. So how is Delhi different? Even before trying to understand, like I've clearly said, in 1992, Delhi was given a special status, designated as a special status and called the National Capital Region. But there is a conscious difference between the states of Delhi and Puducherry. Not about the other union territories, because Delhi and the Puducherry are the only two union territories which have a functional bodies of state legislative assembly. So, but even among them, there is a conscious difference. How is the difference? Puducherry legislature is creation of a parliamentary law, right, based on enabling provisions in Article 239A of the Constitution, right? They're an enabling provision. Whereas the National Capital Region of Delhi has been created by the Constitutional itself. So Article 239AA. So this is not, for Puducherry, it's an extension of an article of a general provision about union territory. But whereas for Delhi, it's a clear constitutional provision that is clearly mentioned in it under Article 239AA. That means Delhi government and Delhi function has a strong constitutional backing, which is directly deriving its power from the Constitution. So hence the Supreme Court over a period of time has said the National Capital Territory as sui generis. So that means it has its own power. It's coming from its own constitutional backing, a special constitutional backing. So at the same time, the Supreme Court has also time and again has said this National Capital Territory is also limited in terms of its legislative power. As we all know, that I said in the previous part of the video, I said that the parliament can actually make changes in all the lists related to the union territories, exception including Puducherry and Delhi. However, we have an exception for Delhi. The exception is the subjects dealing to legislative matter. Delhi government can do all the changes except in three areas. One is public order, the second one is land, and third one is police. So these are the exceptions that the Delhi government cannot make any changes. So having studied the exceptions, now what is the issue? So we've understood the constitutional importance of NCT. We've understood how it is sui generis of Delhi government. However, there is also constant power tussle or controversy that is coming again and again between the Lieutenant Governor and the Delhi government. So now what are the accusations? The accusations of the Delhi government are the Lieutenant Governor is interfering in the matters where he or she is not supposed to do. What is the accusation of the Lieutenant Governor is Lieutenant Governor says that there is a difference of opinion. So hence I would want to refer this particular matter to the President. So these are the two varieties. Now let's discuss these varieties in a much more detailed way. So NCT versus Union of India case 2018 have clearly mentioned the jurisdictional conflicts between the NCT, National Capital Territory, and Lieutenant Governor. In this case, it clearly said the exercise of establishing a democratic government and a representative government of NCT of Delhi are mandated by Article 239AA and Article 239AB. That means Lieutenant Governor has to bound to act on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, except in the matters of land, public order, and police. So we again reiterating the same fact. Even Supreme Court has reiterated the same fact in this particular judgment. So now the difference of opinion is a clause that is creating the problem. So when there is a difference of opinion between the Council of Ministers or between the elected government of Delhi and between the Lieutenant Governor can refer to that to the President. So now how this particular directive is controversial is this case of difference of opinion is a slippery slope. So it can be at the behest of understanding of Lieutenant Governor, and whenever the Lieutenant Governor, he or she, would not agree with the elected government, they can put in and they can invoke this clause. Hence, this becomes all the more power tussle between the Lieutenant Governor and Delhi. So, what do we do? The Supreme Court judgment of NCT versus Union of India 2008 has clearly mandated and has actually threw light on certain important factors. What are those factors? One is constitutional morality. Now, what do we understand by constitutional morality? The constitutional morality simply means that the principles, that the rules, the framework that are established by constitution should not be at any cost breached, and hence the moral and the morality that the constitution gives to this country and to the law, to the land of this country, have to be followed at any cost. That's the morality of the constitution. So constitutional morality has to be maintained at any cost. So this is invoking a very theoretical understanding of how the government and Lieutenant Governor has to actually function and conduct themselves in a larger democratic setup. Now the second part is cooperative federalism. We clearly know that India is a federal country, but however we have a unitary tilt. We nowhere in the constitution say it's a federation of states, but Indian constitution clearly says Bharat, that is India, it's the union of states. However, in the kind of provisions that we have somebody calls it KCVR, expert on constitution calls it quasi-federal, some people calls it unitary, some people call it only federal. So there are multiple contentions in terms of analysis of the federalism of India. However, since we are in a period of cooperative federalism where the cooperation between the states, between the union territories is very important for smooth functioning of the country. Hence, the Supreme Court is invoking such clauses. And most importantly, constitutional conscience. What is this constitution? I mean, this might look like a heavy legal jargon or a normal newspaper rhetoric, but these are very important to differentiate your answers from others and to understand the larger concepts. Because You're going to write what union territories, you're going to write the special provisions of Delhi, you're going to say 1 2 3 points about Delhi, how it's a different from Puducherry and other union territories, its constitutional mandate, how lieutenant governor is functioning, and what are the three areas the Delhi government is not supposed to work or is not supposed to do any legislation. So this is a very generic understanding that you would get by reading your textbook, or you would get generally by just having a research. But larger analysis of why it is important to maintain such separation of power and to respect representative government is because our country and our democratic functioning is based on certain principles. The principles that I said about constitutional morality, the other principle is about cooperative federalism. You keep hearing Prime Minister Mr. Narendra Modi's speeches when he gives a clarion call about cooperation, collaboration, competition. So these three things can happen in a more healthy environment where there is no power tussle, where there is no wanted interference between various parts of the government. That is something that we all want. So next we have constitutional conscience, as I said, that if you act against the constitution, if you act against what is given in the constitution, it means you are going against the constitutional conscience of this country, which is completely unwarranted, which is completely uncalled for. Hence, this kind of tussle, this kind of perhaps an unwarranted tussle would not be entertained. And next is pragmatic federalism. What is pragmatic federalism? So what in a federal setup, we might have rules and we might have regulations, but not necessarily all rules and regulations will have a hard boundary, right? So hence there should be certain scope. Let's assume presumably that the lieutenant governor would say in XYZ case, in this particular case, appointing of prosecutors would entail difference of opinion, but not every difference of opinion has to dealt with an iron fist. There are always scope for dialogue, there's always scope for discussion. Hence, not every difference of opinion can lead to conflict and actually create a power tussle, because at the end of the day, it will only delay the welfare of the state. It will only delay the delivery of goods and services for the citizenry of that particular state. So hence, pragmatic federalism as a principle has to be seriously taken whenever we see such kind of issues. Next, constitutional governance. So you might think they're all same. It's just the constitutional is a directive. Constitutional morality, constitutional conscience, constitutional governances in country today. When you're all, most of you, I hope you all will become bureaucrats of whatever aspirations that you have. What is your fundamental allegiance to? Your fundamental allegiance, your fundamental loyalty towards this country flows from your allegiance to the constitution. And your constitution is a law of the land. And that constitution derives its power from its people. So there is this dual discourse happening between the people and between the constitution, where it is only increasing the legitimacy of constitutional governance. In that case, we need to have utmost respect, utmost compliance, and utmost seriousness in terms of following constitutional provisions whenever issues arise in terms of conflicts. So this is roughly the background of why the national capital region Delhi is in news, and what are the problems in trying to establish peaceful work conditions with for the government of Delhi and also the lieutenant governor. And apart from this, we also have another issue about, if let's assume the case of difference of opinion is not really negotiable or reconcilable, then we always have a provision of invoking a clause of failure of constitutional machinery in that particular state. The president can directly come in and have his rule. We have something called presidential rule under Article 356. Right. So what we are trying to say is, when you think the constitutional provisions are not being followed, we also have constitutional safeguards to maintain that in intact. One need not to constantly get into the tussle so that it stops the functioning of a representative and elected government. I think this is the crux of today's video, is that whenever there is an issue, the issue necessarily should not let things come to a standstill, right? So, but also, even adding to this, we also need to understand that the lieutenant governor has some powers too, right? As that of governor, that he can give in an ordinance, he can promulgate an ordinance when the assembly is in recess. He can bring in, or he can give his expertise on various issues. He can always work with the aid of and advice of the Council of Ministers. He has his role to play as per mandated by the central government. So that he so what is the whole point of having an administrator or lieutenant governor is they are facilitators in governance. They should not be hindrances in governance mechanisms. So this is where the problem lies, whether it is governor or whether it is speaker or whether it is lieutenant governor. These are offices which are supposed to facilitate the smooth functioning of legislative, executive processes in the particular state, so that there is happy functioning, so that there is the welfare aspects of the welfare state of India that are enshrined in our constitution are conducted in a more smoother manner, but not the other way around. Right. So this is roughly the background of why NCT and the lieutenant governor thing is in news. And if there are any doubts about this, you can comment and get back to us on this issue. Thank you.